Hey everybody, we do have a block day this week, so we're going to use that block day to analyze minorities during World War II. So we're going to kind of look at that as a intro to that today. Let's talk about African Americans first. So you see the little poster here, United We Win, the idea that there were over 1 million African Americans that worked in war plants. But at the same time, there's still a lot of racial tension. They weren't given a lot of the same jobs as white workers. In fact, because of this, there were race riots in Detroit that killed 34 guys. They had to bring in 6,000 soldiers to restore order. And eventually this changed. And here's kind of, what had done with it. And here we have a little Dr. Seuss cartoon about the war industry. It says, white labor, black labor. If you use, you real hard when you use black keys as well, kind of a little, hit on that. Um, Industries were always hire the most qualified African American workers. Still a lot of segregation, so white and black workers weren't allowed to work together. Wages for African Americans were a lot lower than white workers were for the exact same job, even job wise. I mean, in a factory that needed 1,000 people, they might not hire an African American worker for the job that would make more money. They may say, okay, you're a janitor instead. They'll get a runaround. Well, we'll see you need people next week, kind of thing. Um, Even the military, a lot of times troops are segregated, not a lot of times not in combat. A lot of times they're only used as laborers or cooks. So, like the Navy example, we watched the clip from Pearl Harbor. Notice the cooks are always African American on the Navy ships. There are a lot of African Americans who would load and unload the supply ships, like the ships that were full of of weapons and gunpowder and that kind of stuff. In fact, there was a huge explosion in California where a whole ship was full of African Americans who were loading a ship up full of ammunition and ship across the Pacific, and the ship blew up, and all the people killed were African Americans. And some people saw this and said this isn't right. And one person was A. Philip Randolph, who was the president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. Basically, that was the union leader for the Pullman Porters. A Pullman porter was the man who worked on the train cars, would help kind of be like the person who ever set all those kind of things. Um, and he was a union leader, labor leader, and he said, we're going to have a march on Washington, and we're going to force FDR to sign an act that would stop segregation in the workplace. And that was Executive Order 8802. Executive Order is an order from the president, okay? That said we're going to stop workplace discrimination. Not military. The military is so segregated, but workplace things would not happen. And later on, the FEPC, the Fair Employment Practice Committee, enforced it. There's actually a group that would go to factories and check and make sure that both African Americans and whites got both similar rights. In the military, you have segregated troops, but there's some very famous groups, segregated troops. So they're in the Army Air Force. There was a group that was called the Tuskegee Airmen. They trained at the Tuskegee Institute, that was Booker T. Washington's college. Um, it was an African American college down south. And actually, Eleanor Roosevelt supported this group. There's a very famous photo of her sitting in one of the planes with one of the African American pilots. Um, they're well known because they painted the entire tails of their planes red, and that's how you knew it was that group. And they actually escorted bombers from Italy and North Africa to bomb into Germany, and their records show they did not allow one bomber to get shot down. They always protected their ships, their planes, that kind of stuff. And even white pilots who were racist or who believed in segregation really came to respect the Tuskegee Airmen. So it's one of those stories. So there's a lot of movies made about them. Red Tails is a good movie that just came out recently. There were some all-black units in terms of segregated troops on the ground too. The 761st Tank Battalion was all black unit. There were 6 white officers and 30 black soldiers, and they actually invaded into Germany during World War II. And actually, General Patton, we'll talk about, one of the most famous World War II generals, said it was his favorite group. Really funny story is one time I suppose they had caught captured a group of Nazi soldiers, and it's surrounded with the tanks, and the guys are giving up, and they popped the tank hatch open, and the African Americans got out. The Nazis started laughing, started picking their guns back up because they couldn't believe they didn't believe in being captured by the inferior group, and so um, they're actually one of the most effective groups in all of Europe. In terms of Native Americans, so you see the group of Native Americans here. Um, a lot served in the armed forces, or at least 40,000 Native Americans served in war industry, especially up here in Wisconsin, with a number of Native American tribes up in this area. Most famous people though were the Navajo. The Navajo were used by the Marines to send coded signals in the Pacific. Usually, they would use code to send signals back and forth, and and a lot of times, codes were broken, so you had to make new codes. The Navajo code they used was never broken, and so here's an example of the code. Here's what it was in uh, the the letter that you use for your code, because I have to miss some things with letters. Here's the English word, Navajo word, and English spell. So they would use this different things here. They would use to explain the words, and the Japanese never ever ever broke this code. There's a movie made about this called Wind Talkers. It's actually pretty good, pretty decent. That kind of talked about all the different things that the Navajo code talkers had done. You know, the Hispanics was a little different. Favas worked in war industries. There were groups that were called braceros, who actually, they're actually encouraged to cross the border from Mexico and the United States to work in the farming industries in California, especially. But there were some issues too. One of the very popular trends of this time was something called the zoot suit. And so this here is a zoot suit, a very baggy suit, used a lot of material. You're in a time, and it's very popular with the Hispanic community. Um, and so now you have a time period where you're trying to conserve everything, and especially conservation of fabric, cotton wool, all that kind of stuff. And a group of Hispanics was actually attacked in LA by U.S. soldiers because they were wearing zoot suits, and it started what was called the zoot suit riots. And so a riot broke out in LA. They had to bring in the military MPs to stop the riot over Hispanics wearing zoot suits. And it was, is it racial? Was it about, conservation, patriotism? What was it about? But that's one of the issues that started there. Though there were still over 300,000 Mexican Americans who fought in the war as well. So we see how, all different groups are involved in this. I'm going to spend the last little bit of time talking about Japanese Americans, because they're the biggest deal, especially with the United States, fighting against Japan. First off, Japanese troops are segregated as well. They're also segregated. There's something called the Nisei Battalion. Nisei was a word for an American-born person of Japanese heritage. Now, they didn't serve in the Pacific because the fear was, you would, at least not many served in the Pacific, fear of you being, misconstrued for the enemy. They served in Europe, served in Italy especially, and actually this Nisei Battalion, this Nisei group, earned the most medals for valor than any other group in the war. And actually, a lot of white soldiers actually thought Japanese soldiers were the enemy. They were either infiltrators or spies or that kind of thing. And so they had to deal with a lot of those kind of issues. The biggest issue we're talking about here is Japanese internment. Because on the Pacific West Coast, there were Japanese attacks, if you will. The Japanese tried different ways to attack the West Coast. There was a submarine that surfaced off the coast of California and shot like 3 or 4 explosive rounds into an area. Didn't do much damage. The Japanese had what were called balloon bombs, and so they actually let balloons go in Japan and to drop these fire bombs in the forests of Oregon to burn out all the forests, and not many actually worked. But the big fear was because of the number of Japanese immigrants and people of Japanese heritage on the West Coast, in California, in Oregon, in Washington, and Hawaii for that matter, was the fear of sabotage. So the president had signed something called Executive Order 1066, he signed, which basically said that Japanese people would be interned. And we'll kind of talk about this here going forward here. A lot of people are angry, worried about sabotage. I mean, you think about World War II, World War I, the same exact thing happened with German Americans, happens here with Japanese Americans. And so a lot of these people are citizens. Most of them are been in the United States for multiple generations, Japanese heritage, not first generation immigrants. Here's a Dr. Seuss cartoon where it's kind of showing this. So the honorable fifth column, it shows the very stereotypical Japanese person being given bundles of TNT explosives to go blow up things. And so there was definitely a fear, and it was kind of a public fear of this stuff happening. So Executive Order 966, which was signed by President Roosevelt, created these military camps. Okay, Japanese Americans had to sell their belongings, they could carry what they could, and move into these special camps. And they were told it was for their protection, because they're afraid that white Americans might start taking their anger out on them. Also, the fear of sabotaging as well. Is it unfair? Well, think about it. Japanese Americans had to sell their homes, sell their businesses, and all those businesses got bought up by white owners. and a lot of times they had to sell fast, so they lost a lot of money because you had to sell it like that. You couldn't hold out for your best price. Um, the camps themselves, here's an example of a camp here. We're all over the place. They're called internment camps, so it wasn't like a concentration camp, it was an internment camp. Um, Located in California, Oregon, they're Wyoming, Arkansas, all across the country. You find these camps. A lot of times you can only bring what you could carry with you. Clothes on your back, a bag, that thing. Not a lot. Every family got a little small barrack. These are divided into little barrack chunks here. This is from Manzanar, the most famous camp in California. You can only carry with you what you could bring. They're cramped. There's very cold winter time. There's no heaters a lot of times. Not a lot of warm clothes. A lot of times you didn't have much possessions with you. Um, and you were not allowed to leave. And there's a curfew; you could not leave at a certain time. I met a man in Madison. He actually came and talked to my class. He was a young boy in one of the camps. He was a Japanese American, pretty prominent in the Madison community. And he was in the camp as an 8-year-old. And one night he had to go to the bathroom, and they didn't have a bathroom inside the little barracks that they had. Instead, he had to go to an outhouse. Well, he wasn't feeling good, had to go to the bathroom. He leaves the little barrack that they have, and he's outside, and all of a sudden a soldier says, "Stop there." He cocks his gun and points it right at his face and says, "What are you doing?" And so, you had to follow that curfew, and it was a very, very serious kind of thing to follow the curfew. So you had to make sure you stayed there. You could not leave, and that kind of stuff. Eventually, a man named Fred Korematsu, Japanese immigrant, he did sue the United States. Korematsu refused to leave his house when he was told he had to leave, and was arrested, put in jail, and he started the appeal process. He stated his individual rights were being violated by being taken to the camp. So his rights to live where he needs to, his rights to free speech, his rights to all the rights that is dictated to other citizens of the United States. I mean, you talk about how during World War One, well, German immigrants weren't rounded up and weren't being rounded up and put into camps, that kind of stuff. And so his individual personal rights were being violated, and and the Supreme Court eventually ruled in his favor, with the camps being closed um, before the end of World War II, and those camps being done. On release, well, Japanese people were given $25 a piece and a train ticket back to their families. But think about it: their home was sold, their business was gone, they lost a lot of money, had to start over. Is it fair? Should have happened. Something we're going to talk about in class more on Thursday, guys. By the way, in 1988, each surviving intern was given a $20,000 I'm sorry check, if you will, basically, but $1.4 billion in total. And a lot of people question, was that enough? Is it enough? Well, that's to debate later. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll talk about this more on Thursday. We have our block day. We'll do a couple of different activities looking at both Zoot Suit riots, African Americans, as well as the Japanese internment. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good day.